Philip Douthett, the men's marriage mentor here. I help men renew their failing marriages while creating a meaningful legacy. And if that's what you're looking to do, then you're definitely going to want to take notes on today's video. And if you found this information that you're going to learn today to be valuable, be sure to share this video and click the like and subscribe button so that you get the notifications of other videos that I release. Before we get into the video, be sure to stick around to the end where I reveal the details on how you can join me in my free training that walks you through how to renew your failing marriage by doing the right things at the right time in the right order, even if your situation feels completely hopeless right now. So be sure to stick around to the end for that announcement. And just so you know what to expect here, this video that you're about to watch was a training that I did inside of my private group that is directly related to the title of today's video. So get ready to take notes, then apply what you learn so that you can get the results that you desire. So with no further delay, let's get to it. An ultimatum, whether it's coming from you or from your wife, is detrimental to your marriage. I promise you that. And I'm going to explain to you guys what exactly that means and why it's so dangerous to, well, your life overall and your marriage. So you need to understand that you should never give an ultimatum unless you are willing and able to accept the consequences of what could happen when you give an ultimatum. You see, what I've noticed over the years of doing this is that most people, what they do is they falsely, unrealistically think that when they give an ultimatum, then the other person will start to act a certain way. They'll start to do certain things. They will say certain things. But that's really not the case, okay? It just creates tension and confrontation. I'm going to explain what that means here. So for some of you, ask yourself this. Is your wife telling you that your marriage is over if you don't stop doing something? So think about that. Is your wife saying, if you don't stop doing this or you start doing this, then everything is over. The marriage is done. So maybe your wife is having an affair. Maybe she's obsessed with an activity that takes her away from the family. Maybe she works a lot. Maybe she's addicted to drugs or alcohol. Maybe you're the one that's receiving the ultimatum from your wife, and you're the one that's struggling with certain situations going on in your own head, right? And so however you decide to address this, keep in mind that it's never a good thing when you either receive one or when you give one. So here's the thing. It boils down to one question, and that question is this. How do you get your wife to stop a behavior that's ruining the marriage? Ask yourself that question. And some of you are actually asking yourself that question. How do I get my wife to stop doing something? How do I get my wife to, not participate in something that is ruining the marriage? And I get that. There's a certain amount of control and power that you want to instill into the relationship, but it's going to be met with confrontation. I'm going to explain here what exactly that means. You see, understand that it's an idiotic situation when you are giving an ultimatum, especially to your, obviously to your wife. So think about it this way. I get the idea that, and I understand the idea that an ultimatum, it sounds powerful. It makes you sound as though you have some control. It makes you feel as though you have some input and some power over the situation. But does it work? No. Why? Because an ultimatum suggests a role reversal. So what does that mean? By no means do I want you to misunderstand me here, guys. Understand that there's a role reversal here, but understand this. Your unacceptable behavior or the unacceptable behavior of your wife is your responsibility. I didn't say it's your fault, but it's your responsibility. You choose how you act, how you respond, not react, but how you act and respond to the choices that she makes. And you make as well, but mainly her, like directed as how do you respond to her, okay? See, the issue that comes into play here is that the connection that you truly seek may need to be established without the cooperation or participation of your wife. In other words, I talk about this quite often. It's being a solo soldier, right? What's a solo soldier? It's a man that's fighting alone to save his failing marriage with no support or cooperation from his wife. So that's on you, your responsibility. It's on your shoulders to do this. Again, you're not necessarily to blame, but you are responsible for how you respond and do things. Okay? We're going to get into that as we move forward. So if, just as an example, if your wife is doing something that you feel needs to stop, and what happens to you? You feel as though you are the victim, right? And as a victim, what happens? You want to have some sort of control. You want to have some sort of input and power over the situation because you feel helpless to do anything else, right? And it sounds attractive on the outside. Oh, if I say this and I tell my wife, if you stop doing this, this is going to happen, or I'm going to stop doing this, or I'm just going to file for divorce. You put that ultimatum on her. You might feel a little bit better about yourself because you can pound your chest and be like, I got some power and some control over the situation, and I put my foot down and I set some boundaries and all that bullshit. But it's met with resistance. Okay? It gives you some sort of power trip or feeling of false accomplishment short term, but what about the long term? Ask yourself 3 questions. I want you to think about 3 questions here. Number 1, will the long-term impact of an ultimatum give me the result that I want? 2, will it be good for the marriage? And 3, will it lead to the restoration of the marriage? Those are very tough questions to answer, especially coming from the outside. If you're not skilled on how to handle the situation, it's a challenging question to answer. But I'm going to tell you, professionally and personally, the answer is no. No. But yes, the idea of, like I said, an ultimatum sets boundaries and rules and makes you feel like you have some input and power. But I want you to understand the perspective of your wife. Why would she want to follow your rules, your boundaries, your power that you put into place? Why would she want to put it to follow along? What's in it for her? You see, what's the motivation for her to adhere to your rules and boundaries? Now, I'm sure that your wife understands the boundaries. She understands these so-called rules that you put into play. But why would she want to participate? You see, this goes to show you guys that most people, doesn't matter, men, women, doesn't matter, they are doing it all wrong when it comes to ultimatums. Whereas they attempt to rectify the situation using logic, which is directly related to what? The head, the brain, right? Instead of motivation, which is connected right here. It's directed to the heart, okay? And so I'd be willing to bet if your wife is doing something that is destructive to the marriage overall, she knows that her actions are destructive. You know that your actions are destructive to the marriage. But understand that the problem is not a lack of boundaries or rules or power. It's a lack of motivation and incentive. In other words, what does that mean? So in other words, you're not giving your wife a desire to participate in the following of your rules that you have, so proudly instilled, because she doesn't see, she doesn't feel, she doesn't desire what you have to offer in the moment. And you see, we can change that, but it's going to take some work on your part, okay? So here's the thing. Your wife knows that her actions are hurting the marriage, but she may not admit it, but she knows. She knows. And maybe I'd be willing to bet that it's true that she can actually justify her actions if you confront her on them. Okay? So the same is true if the roles were switched the other way around. But deep down, I want you guys to look in the mirror. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, is this worth it? Like, what am I doing when I set the rules of a, set the boundaries of a ultimatum? Is that worth doing? Like I said, obviously the answer is no. And so, understand that when you ask yourself that question, you look in the mirror and you say, look, are these actions, are they insensitive? Are they immoral? Are they dishonest? Are they crude? Are they corrupt? Are they mean? Are they disingenuous? Or any combination of those words, right? But you know You look in the mirror, you know, and or she knows that these actions are destroying the heart and soul. But what's the real problem there? What's the real problem? The real problem, the underlying real problem, is that there's a lack of care and attention that leads to a lack of motivation to do the right thing. In other words, you have to want to stop, and she has to want to stop as well. The secret is getting you or her, depending on the situation, to get in touch with your or her innermost motivation to want to stop. You see, understand that an ultimatum, like I said, it does put boundaries, it does put, rules on the marriage as viewed from the outside, but it doesn't do anything to tackle the motivation of your heart. Okay? And it might feel good, like I said, for you to instill this motivation in the short term, but not the long term. Okay? In the long term, you have to want the desire to change. Okay? Now, I use change very loosely because there is a difference between changing and shifting there. Okay? And this is why, I'm like a humble brag here, but, my program, the Men's Marriage Mastery Program, it's focused on building and renewing a connection with one another. Okay? It's not focused on, like problem solving or communication strategies or, that kind of thing. It's not focused on that, right? Obviously, I do touch on it. I touch on, problem solving, communication strategies and things like that, but I intertwine them in ways that will connect you and your wife. And I do say the word connect there on purpose, okay? Because if you've been following me for a while, you know that I've talked about this before, that connection is a lower level of love. But right now, if you're struggling in the relationship, the love is not there yet. You've got to focus on the connection. You got to build the foundation first. And so, like I said, the key word there is connect. Now think about this. Disconnected people will often marry other disconnected people. And so you are more than likely, you're married one another because you're both feeling some sort of disconnection in your life. But it's probably, I'd be willing to bet that most of you're feeling that disconnection because of your childhood. Maybe you have some abandonment issues. Maybe there's a past relationship. Like you feel like you were married once and then there's a disconnect there because she left you for whatever reason. And so there's some disconnection there within your own heart and soul. And that disconnection, here's the kicker. That disconnection feels what? It feels familiar. It feels like, that I'm used to it. That's who I am. It becomes, you label it as something that's become a part of you. And you say, that's just the way I am. Or that's just who I am, or whatever you want to label it as. Okay? And so, here's the thing. The real dysfunction is when you realize that you probably married your wife, or she married you because you didn't need, or she didn't need, something that you could not offer one another. So in other words, you didn't have to make a real connection with one another at the early stages of your marriage or relationship, while you were dating, I should say. You didn't have to make a real connection. Because that disconnect that you felt in your, subconsciously was familiar. So people are drawn to what's familiar. But it's true. It's true. But that pattern, for you guys, it does not have to keep repeating itself if you choose to take certain actions to actually change that. So think about it this way. If you lack a real connection with other people, then you will innately grasp onto anyone or anything in an effort to feel a connection. And that's usually where people start to step outside of the marriage. Let's talk about that here real quick. So if you lack an emotional connection with your wife, or she lacks an emotional connection with you, then that is the type of thing that will drive you or will drive her to fill that void. You're seeking to fill that void, or she is seeking to fill that void, that disconnect in your life, in her life, with someone or something else outside of the marriage. Now, it could be an affair, it could be drugs, could be video games, could be work, it could be spending a lot of time in the gym, it could be committing or an obsessive amount of time and energy towards work or hobby or an activity or something like that pulls you away from your wife, or she's pulling away from you because you, and I mean, when I say you, I mean either you personally or her, pulling one another away from each other because there's focus somewhere else. You're seeking that connection somewhere else outside of the marriage. And while these types of obsessions or seekings of connection outside of the marriage give you some sort of short-term fulfillment, they don't fill the emptiness that you feel within your own heart and soul, because there's a lack of what? Connection. So what do? Like I said earlier, you must create a profound, a strong, a deep-rooted, a meaningful connection between you two. And when you do that, what happens? When you do that, you eliminate the desire, the motivation to continue the damaging activities, because you become each other's source of that motivation. But I'm willing to bet that a deeper connection with one another fills that void, which can be traced back to probably your childhood, right? Or your wife's childhood, in the form of what? A lack of connection with a parent. You see, the connection here that you establish with one another can be so powerful, can be absolutely magnificent, it can be wonderful, and it can surpass your yearning of short-term fulfillment of a damaging behavior or actions. But it takes a lot of work, commitment, dedication, patience, the dreaded P word. I refer to that a lot. The dreaded P word, patience, because everybody wants it now, to make all of that happen. Because I'm quite certain that most of you have absolutely no idea how to deeply and completely connect with one another. And like I said earlier, even if you're working as a solo soldier, meaning you're fighting alone to save your failing marriage with no support or cooperation from your wife, there's ways around that. And if you do them correctly, I'd be willing to bet that your wife is willing to get on board and participate in the renewal of the marriage. But you have to be three things. Ask yourself these three things. If you're not, there's nothing that anybody can do for you. Ask yourself three things. Are you committed? Most of you will say yes, or all of you will say yes. Are you coachable? Are you willing to take, constructive criticism? And are you resourceful? Those three things. Committed, coachable, resourceful. When I talk about motivation is you being responsible for your actions, your thoughts, your duties, if you will, to renew the relationship. I didn't say, like I said earlier, I did not say that you are to blame for all of her actions, but you are responsible for how you respond, and act. I shouldn't say react, but respond and act in the situation that you're going through, or when your wife confronts you. Like, you are responsible. Not to blame, but responsible, okay? So what does that mean? You, as the husband, have to step up and be the best version of a man, husband, and father that you can be. Because if not, she's going to go seek that connection for someone or something else outside of the relationship. Because right now, she's not finding it right here, right now with you in the marriage. So you've got to build that confidence. I talk about this a lot. You've got to be the one who can instill confidence, not just in yourself, but into other areas of your life, Be the confident man that is willing, able, and has the tenacity and the patience to lead the relationship towards reconciliation. And when you do that, when you put your foot down, you draw a line in the sand, you say, look, the buck stops here. I'm drawing a line in the sand. I'm going to do whatever it takes necessary to renew the relationship, but it first starts with you. And that's why I say it's your responsibility to renew the relationship. You don't have to like that. You don't have to like, oh, it's always the man's fault. It's not your fault. Some men it is your fault, but it's not your fault completely, but it is your responsibility to do something about it. So don't get all defensive. Like, oh man, why is it always the man's fault? Everybody says it's the man's fault. Fuck off. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's not your fault completely. You share some blame, but it is your responsibility to instill the motivation for your wife to want to participate in the renewal of the marriage. Get it? I hope that makes sense, guys. I just covered a lot of great information that will help you to renew both yourself and your marriage. And I hope that you put everything that you just learned into practice, because that's the only way that you're going to get results. But there is so much more that you can do, and I'm going to cover all of that in my free training that walks you through how to renew your marriage, even if your wife has told you that there's nothing that you can do to change her mind. So if you'd like to learn the specific strategies and methods that thousands of my clients have used and continue to use to renew their failing marriages and create a meaningful legacy, then click the link below, watch that free training, and then feel free to submit an application after that. Also, be sure to click the link to access my private Facebook group, where you can get support and connect and even learn from a community of men who are also struggling to keep their failing marriages together. And when you join, I'll even send you a free copy of my latest ebook. And if you like what you heard today and you want more content like this from me, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to comment below with any questions or tell me whatever it is that you found to be the most helpful. And like I mentioned before, click the link below for that free training that I mentioned earlier. I'm Philip Douthett, the Men's Marriage Mentor, and I'll see you on the next video.